Can't thank you enough. This is a 4-year arduous journey trying to get this thing together. And, okay, so please, the noted pediatrician and author and expert on organic nutrition, father of 4, Dr. Alan Green. Next to him, I love the way you smile at me. Judi Shils, who is in Marin County and just a wonderful individual itself and head of Teens Turning Green. The very first person I had spoken to in 2009 was a person who was very skeptical of me and saying, who the hell are you and what do you want? Who is funding you? And I remember the day. She said, who's funding you? And I said, well, it's just me. And that's Mrs. Stacy Malkan, please. Now, although she had been interviewed in the film itself, the policy and communications director, and what an amazing job she's done in helping to promote the film, Kristen Schaefer from the Pesticide Action Network North America. You might not recognize him at this point because he's without his goatee, but I loved it when he invited me into his home to film him, Mr. Joe Guth with Sen, and the UC Berkeley Center for Green Chemistry. And last but not least, we've done this quite a few times, haven't we? From the Earth Island Institute and also former Pennsylvania native, Mr. Kevin Connelly. All right, thank you for the warm round of applause, and I will start with, well, the man directly to my left, Dr. Alan Green. All right, you've been practicing pediatrician for over 20 years. What are the biggest changes you've seen in children's health over that period?
Well, over the last couple of decades, we've seen a really dramatic shift in kids' health. The rise of many chronic illnesses. It used to be, as you saw in the movie, it's a lot of infections for kids, and today it's chronic illnesses. 2/3 of today's children have what used to be a middle-aged health condition by the time they graduate from high school. And that's rapid change from when I started in practice.
It's almost unbelievable to hear something like that, and to know that that's one of the big challenges that we're facing, obviously, and we're working on that, obviously, and of course, because of your efforts, things are getting better, hopefully. Judi, what role do you see? I'm going to pass the microphone down so to make everything. Oh, and then we have another one, by the way, Kevin. Thank you. If you could give that to Judi, please. Judi, what role do you see youth playing in today's environmental movement as head of Teens Turning Green?
I think probably the biggest role we can imagine. Everybody listens to kids, their teachers, their parents, our legislators. Everybody they speak to wants to hear what they have to say. So I think part of the gift of running Teens Turning Green is that we get to make sure that our kids sitting right here know how powerful their voices are, know how to raise them and speak up when they think there's an injustice in the world. And I have the gift of working with them every single day and really mentoring and then mentoring back and inspiring me to keep going and to keep helping them get to wherever they have to get because they are the future.
What a beautiful answer. Thank you, Judi. Stacy. Nice to see you again. It's always... Stacy and I have a funny anecdote about Stacy. Last time we were together here in Berkeley, she said, do you want to get a Corona with me? And I was like, oh my God, no, I can't stand that beer. And she was like shocked by my reaction. But we're not, thankfully we're not drinking anything right now. And question first, Stacy, what prompted you? Now, she had written an amazing book, which was one of the most influential parts of the film, Not Just a Pretty Face. And if you don't have a copy right now, I highly recommend you pick it up. Now, what prompted you to write that book about personal care products?
All of us every single day have the experience of putting personal care products on our bodies, and I was quite a fan of makeup and hair products, and I write about this in the book when I was a teen, but never thought about what was in the products until many years later I started to question. I wanted to know, my colleagues in the Breast Cancer Fund, Environmental Working Group, Friends of the Earth wanted to know what's in the products that we're rubbing on our skin, putting in our hair, putting in the bathtub with our kids. So we started the campaign for Safe Cosmetics, and we decided to research that. We sent hundreds of products to labs to have them tested, and our colleagues at EWG built the world's largest database of chemicals in cosmetics, and really opened the window on this industry to show that most products, everything from deodorants, shampoos, lotions, even baby bath products, contain chemicals linked to cancer, hormone disruption, all the things we saw in the film. So I wrote in the book about that research and about what happened when a group of breast cancer activists went to the world's largest beauty companies asking them to stop using chemicals linked to cancer. And they, as you can imagine, they really didn't want to have that conversation. But now they're having it. They're having to face this because people are waking up. They're making different choices. They're choosing, with their dollars and talking with our friends. And I think, the film kit is pretty overwhelming. And I think that's good. I think we need to sort of face that overwhelm. And really look into it and see that we truly have power to change this and it's happening. So I think we're really at an exciting point where we do have an opportunity to make change in Washington, D.C. We are seeing major changes in the market. People are waking up. So sharing information and really pushing through the overwhelm to realize that that taking the power to learn, to take action really feels good. It's really, I think you get to a point of feeling empowered by this if you can get through the parts where it feels overwhelming. And when Ed called and asked, and I said, "Who are you?" By the way, then everybody asked me, "Who is this guy?" And I introduced you to these wonderful people.
It's a memorable moment for me, and I appreciate that, Stacy. And it was a wonderful answer. Thank you. Thank you very much. And awareness is what this film is all about. Now, Kristen Schaefer, Pesticide Action Network, is literally on the front lines of this issue with pesticides. I mean, it's in the name of your organization, obviously. Now, why is this such a difficult fight?
So, thanks for the question. First, I want to thank you for making the film.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So, I guess I would start. Can you hear me? Is this working? Okay.
Is that all right? Is that working for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Please get
Closer to you.
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah.
That actually, I think who's on the front lines of this fight is our kids. We know that kids, basically, when they're small, they're taking in more from their environment than adults do. They eat more, they drink more, they actually breathe more air in, pound for pound, than adults do. So when that food and that water and that air has chemicals in it, they get a bigger dose. So back to your question, though, about why this is such a tough fight, I think that's absolutely the right question to ask. And how is it that when the science is telling us that these 1.2 billion pounds of pesticides that we're using every year are harming us, how can we continue doing that? Farmers have become reliant on these chemicals through no fault of their own. Many of the farmers we work with are frustrated because they see the resistance, the bugs and the weeds get more resistant as they use these chemicals. They have to hop from toxic product to toxic product. So it's not serving the interests of farmers. It's not serving the interests of farm workers, certainly. The system as it is doesn't serve the interests of rural communities and certainly not our kids. So it's serving the interests of the pesticide corporations that are making millions of dollars with these thousands of products that they're promoting and marketing every year. And they spend millions on lobbying to keep the system in place, on marketing, and on science that kind of backs up their arguments that we should continue with the current system. We call it the big six pesticide corporations. There aren't very many of them, but they have a lot of power. You'll recognize them. Monsanto, you had a lot of the images up there. Bayer, Dow, they're very powerful. Just one example, I loved in the film the clip about managing outrage. and how important a strategy that is. And we just recently actually have heard that Monsanto has signed on one of the best PR firms to respond to all of the concern that's being raised about the GM products, the seeds they're making, and all the pesticide use that's increasing as a result of those seeds. So that's kind of what we're up against. That's why this is a tough battle. The good news is that there really is a lot more interest in and concern about these issues. People want to know where their food comes from and how it affects their health and how it affects the health of communities where it's produced, and farmers and farm workers in rural communities and kids. And the good news is there's more of us than there are of them. So.
Joe Guth, I always wish I had more time to spend with you. You seem like a cool guy to hang out with, and I really mean that. I mean it, really. You talk about the fate of organisms, to me, exposed to chemicals in a petri dish. We're kind of like chemicals, or organisms in the petri dish on this planet, analogously. And are we really that different than the petri dish right now?
Well, we talked about that in our interview, but those comments I don't think were in the.
No, they weren't.
film.
It was just, yeah.
Well, I think many of the speakers in the film made it very clear that in the sense of being exposed to chemicals and the way they penetrate our bodies and absorb through our skin, we're not all that different at all. But there was another sense in which I was talking about that point, which is that bacteria in a petri dish have really no control over their fate. They either grow until they deplete their food and they die, or they grow until they pollute the petri dish with their own waste and then they die. I mean, that's their fate. And but there's something sort of tragic about it, right? They're in a contained environment, and their biology is something they're programmed to grow. And in a contained environment, it's doomed for them, right? So the analogy I was drawing to us and them is that we are growing, within a contained environment also. The Earth is a finite size. There's only so many cubic miles of water, of air, so many square miles of land. And as unimaginable as it might have been only a century or two ago, we are encroaching the limits that the Earth has. And if people don't think we are now, we will. I mean, it's inevitable. So, are we the same as bacteria? Well, there's one difference between us and them, and that is that we can see that happening. And I think we do have the power, of our minds, of our projection, of analysis, gathering data, of thought, of seeing this happening, and we know what we have to do about it. And I think we can. And so that is the difference. But what is it going to take? I think we're fighting, some powerful biological impulses within us to live in the world in a constrained way. So it's going to be difficult. It's going to take a lot of education, a lot of knowledge, a lot of awareness. And so I think this film is a critical part of that effort. And I salute you for it.
I appreciate that. I always defer to the work that you are doing and everybody else here and everybody else that's working to make this a better place, because I was lucky enough to be able to interview all of you and capture you on film and stuff like that. And, it's because of those opinions and those feelings and those thoughts that translate so well to an audience like this that we'll be able to make a difference together. Kevin Connelly from the Earth Island Institute. You're renowned for supporting the people that want to change the world, starting with our youth. Now tell us about the New Leaders Initiative and the Brower Youth Awards and how that ties into everything we're talking about today.
Well, sure, Ed, but I want to take the opportunity to extend my thanks to you for making this film, for including me in this film briefly, and for inviting me back to be on the panels with you. And I want to thank Susan for introducing us and making this all happen, one of the producers on the film. And I want to just say I'm honored and appreciate being on this stage with experts, really my heroes and sheroes of this movement. Really, a guy like Ed from Pennsylvania that cares about this stuff and tries to make a difference. These are really the knowledgeable experts out there thinking and doing. And I want to extend my appreciation and thanks to each and every one of you for being here, for being interested enough in this issue to spend the time to come out here and learn, and hopefully to take what you've learned back out to your family and the wider community and to make a difference. Because as Ed said, that's really what Earth Island is all about. We're organized to empower individuals like these experts, like people with a passion like Ed and a curiosity to make a difference, and for individuals like you who want to be involved and help change the world, because really that's who's going to change the world, each and every one of us. And we've been around for 30 years. We were founded right here in San Francisco by the visionary environmental leader David Brower. We're now over in the David Brower Center, which is a LEED Platinum Green building, which is sort of walking the talk, sort of a clean green building over by the UC Berkeley campus. And we're a fiscal sponsor. We're the organizational home to 64 affiliated projects that work on a whole range of environmental issues with solution-focused approaches based here in the Bay Area, doing work around the country and in over 55 countries around the world. Just want to call out a few that work on topics that were addressed in the film. We are home to the Plastic Pollution Coalition, which is a coalition of 50 organizations working on the whole range of issues around plastic and plastic pollution, like the gyre that was shown in the film, like endocrine disruptors, which was talked about, and trying to ban and phase out BPAs from our food cans and our sippy cups and our babies' bottles and things like that to get into our systems, to our Safe Food and Fertilizer program that deals with that toxic sludge that they're putting on our food supply, to my esteemed Shiro colleague, Dr. Ricky Ott, who is a marine toxicologist who single-handedly led the effort to mobilize the community in Valdez for over 20 years against Exxon, and then took her knowledge and expertise to the Gulf when the BP catastrophe happened, and was telling people in the community about the contamination and concerns from this spraying, unbridled, unprecedented spraying of Corexit to try to hide this stuff, and how damaging that was when medical professionals were being bought off by BP and these corporations, to alternatives to these things, natural products, things like industrial hemp. My colleague, John Trudell, the Native American leader, has a hemp project, advocacy project, because there are alternatives to these petrochemical plastics and things like that. To our support of emerging young leaders through our New Leaders Initiative and our annual Brower Youth Awards, which was named for our founder, Brower, who, when we fight these battles and when we win, they're temporary victories. These corporations are going to keep coming back. When we protect a river from being dammed, it's temporary. If they dam it, the river's dammed. If they drill and spill oil, it's polluted and contaminated. If they chop down the forest, it's lost for generations. So we need to bring in young people into our movement. This is a generational fight and struggle. And so we make a commitment to invest your support into finding, identifying, and supporting emerging young leaders. And we do that through our annual Brower Youth Awards, which is this year on October 22nd at the Norse Theater here in San Francisco. It's free, it's fun, and inspirational. I invite each and every one of you. And you can also get involved and support us. And a few folks I want to call out from our recent past is last year we had a young man who's 16 in Worcester, Massachusetts, and Asa Needle, and he and a co-op of other young people are going into the working class and poor communities in Worcester and doing lead abatement, doing testing, doing soil remediation, and they're making a difference in their communities, saving young people, their peers' lives. And a young woman from Chicago a few years ago won Marisol Becerra in a predominantly Hispanic community called Little Village when she grew up next to this factory that they called the Cloud Factory. And she became empowered and enlightened to make a difference through mentors, and they map toxic exposures because there's environmental racism and injustice where they cite these things in poor and communities of color. And they banded together and have made a difference, and they've closed down coal-fired power plants in these communities. And we honored her for that. And to several years ago, to a young woman who was inspired by these great women here on our stage for Jessica Asoff from Marin, Teens for Safe Cosmetics. As teens, as high school students from Marin, when everyone told them, you can't do this, they went to Sacramento. They lobbied through their youthful energy and their charm, got labeling laws passed as youth. So, young people are taking action and we support them, and they need your support and our support and encouragement because it's our time now and their future, and that's one thing we do.
Can't say enough about that. Thank you, seriously. Thank you. Could never reiterate that enough. We'll go back to you, Stacy. Now, you've worked in many different areas, from environmental health to cosmetic safety to GMO labeling on Prop 37 in the beautiful state of California. We don't have any Prop anything in Pennsylvania, unfortunately. So how, saying that, now how deep, whenever it comes to chemicals, is the rabbit hole when we're considering this issue?
I love this question, and especially trying to answer it in 2 minutes. It's as deep as everything we know. I believe the story of environmental health, I think, is so important and so powerful right now because it's showing us, the science is showing us that we're all connected. And we see that through the studies that we know from the science. The same poisons running through the rivers and the oceans are running through our veins, our breast milk, and into every baby born on Earth, as we saw in the film. And when we see that picture that babies are being born pre-polluted with industrial chemicals, I think we have no choice but to say, how can we do things differently? How can we do everything differently? And that's an incredible opportunity, as well as a daunting task and challenge. Our environmental problems are connected too. We're over-reliant on dirty fossil fuels, and the byproducts from oil and fossil fuels are going into the chemicals, into the products that we put on our bodies, and into the baby's tub. And we can do a lot with oil, but one thing we can't do with it is process it in our bodies. So it's really not surprising that we would be having toxic effects to these chemicals. And also putting them on our food and genetically engineering the food to be reliant on pesticides. GMOs is essentially a pesticide scheme. And then behind all this, of course, corporations that are trying to own and control everything. So they have a lot of power, and that can be really scary, but I truly believe the real story is that we have the power. We have the power because we get to decide which products we put on our bodies, what food we eat, what companies we support with our money, and that's the power to change the world. And I so love what Judi does and the young girls here today. If anyone feels depressed, talk to these young women. Because they are so fired up and so much light and energy.
Oh yeah! Absolutely. That's beautiful. Thank you, Stacy. Joe, as an attorney, and a green chemistry advocate, what do you see on the horizon for the new Chemical Safety Improvement Act, which has been brought to our illustrious Senate just over the course of the past few weeks, and the role of government in protecting Americans from exposure to toxic chemicals?
Okay.
That's an easy question, right?
Well, there are efforts in various governments around the world to actually do something about this, and some of them have been quite meaningful. Europeans, a few years ago, passed a monumental piece of legislation in which they're very seriously and realistically getting their arms around these problems. And it's a monumental regulation, and it could always be stronger, but it's hugely transformative, and it's having effects in Europe and throughout the global economy. In fact, it's so serious, it kind of makes you sit up and take notice as to how the European Union, 450 million people in 26 countries, is actually able to accomplish something like this. There's some kind of democratic system there that is working to be able to do that. The state of California has implemented a piece of legislation called the California Green Chemistry Initiative. Final regulations are coming out on that in the fall. That is a much less ambitious program than the European program, but California is going to start trying to get its arms around these problems. It's taken a different approach than the Europeans, and it's just sort of a nascent program, but if it works, it could become significant. And Arnold Schwarzenegger actually signed that legislation into law. The big problem is the U.S. government. You mentioned a recent bill that the Senate has been introduced into the Senate. There's been a bill for several years introduced into the Senate and the House that was developed by many of the people here, many of the people in the film, by the nonprofit community, by the environmentalist community, worked on it very hard with Senator Lautenberg. It was a very serious bill, a lot of thought, a lot of effort went into it, a huge coalition of environmentalists of all kinds and patient advocacy groups from all around the country supported it. And industry just was intransigent, and it failed to get enough support to go forward, although it's still there. It's a very thoughtful piece of work. So industry has floated their own version, and that's what Ed referred to. You know, it is this bill has really torn the environmentalist community, I would say. It may be, I mean, I generally try to be pragmatic about these things, and if something makes the world a better place, even if it's not everything you want, if it's a step forward, it's probably worth doing. This, I don't know. It's really a question. I mean, there are some things about it that are a step forward, but for the most part, it's not. It does not address the fundamental problems. It's nothing like what the Europeans are trying to accomplish. And I think, well, I guess I can't really resist here. I mean, there are a lot of things in it that sound good, and there's a lot of language in it that is taken from the environmentalist bill and from things that environmentalists and people here have advocated for many years. They're in the bill, it looks like that, it looks good, but it's all out on the peripheries, all that language. The core structure of it, the places in the law where the decisions are actually made, the test for whether chemicals can be in the environment or not, is the same as TSCA, Toxic Substances Control Act. So it's not fundamental change, at all. So, it has gotten bipartisan support in the Senate, partly because Senator Lautenberg signed on to it shortly before his death. And he's been our champion for many years, maybe until that moment, unfortunately. So I think in the long run, you have to believe that the approach to California and Europeans, I mean, a lot of things are going to change regardless because of the European law. I think, you have to feel like this is something that is going to get done because it makes so much sense and there's so much at stake. This particular bill, I don't think that it will move us forward very far.
Well, knowing that, we all have to feel, pretty good about ourselves, right? I'm just kidding.
Well, I guess I would say, look, this issue has gotten enough attention to, for many years there were not even any proposed legislation to amend TSCA or do anything about it at all. And so now there are competing bills, and so it's a political issue.
Right.
So that is good.
I think it shows our power that for years they ignored, and now they're in the stage of fighting and trying to get through bills that could actually make things worse. So it's a dangerous moment, but an important time. And I think we have a lot more power than we think as a movement.
Absolutely.
To push for better, demand better, insist on fixing the problem.
Couldn't agree more. Absolutely right. Thank you, everybody. Judi, Teens Turning Green is all about engaging youth and advocating conscious lifestyles. Now, what is the secret to your success?
Well, as Stacy just alluded, the secret to our success is sitting on one of the rows out here and on college campuses all over the country and high school. Basically what we do is we work with students in a variety of ways all over the world, so high school and college students. And once these guys know how powerful they are, they'll walk to the end of the earth to fix and to make just the things that are unjust and broken. And I think I have a gift this summer of working with the kids that are here, but there are 23 interns on our team. And I'm watching the incredible work that is getting done around everything from non-GMO campuses to curriculum that's being written to videos and photos and all sorts of things that are being done to take injustices and fix them. And I think that what I get to do every day is make sure that every young person on this planet knows their power and knows that we're all here to support them. I think what we did this year, JJ, who's sitting down here videotaping, and I went on the road and we went to 15 college campuses. And it was so apparent that when you show up for kids and when you listen and when you mentor, that they just take it and run with it. And I firmly believe that college campuses are a hotbed for change. There's nothing that can't be done, that can't be fixed if you take all of the interdisciplinary dialogues that can happen on a college campus. So any problem there is in the world, I truly believe that can be healed with all of the people on a campus coming together. And so our job is to do that every single day with these guys.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Kristen, pesticides in California, they're a big deal, obviously, today. How can we help? That's really what it comes down to.
Thanks for that question. And because California uses more pesticides than any other state in the country, there are lots of options there are a lot of important issues. There are fumigants that are drifting into communities, there are farm worker poisonings, there's contamination of the water. The thing that we're zeroed in on is a batch of pesticides that cause neurological harm to children. I had the pleasure of working with our pan scientists last year to put together we did a careful review of the studies that are out there and how pesticides are harming kids' health. And one of the things that bubbled up to the top where there's really strong science and there's a really urgent need to do something about it is the impact that these chemicals are having on children's brains and developing nervous systems. You heard a little bit about that in the film. There's right now in California, there's a review of one of the chemicals that has some really strong science. It's called chlorpyrifos. And this is one of the ones where we've known for a long time it's been harmful to kids' health. It was phased out from use in the home back in 2001 because it's harmful to children. But it continues to be used in agriculture. In 2011, there were 1.2 million pounds used in California fields. So right now in Sacramento, policymakers are taking a look at it, and we're doing all we can to put pressure on them and push them to follow the science. Out on the table, there's a petition that folks can sign. We're going to be online collecting signatures and putting pressure. There's also going to be some activity at the national level. EPA is taking a look at this as well. And I think the other thing, just in general, that folks can do is start a conversation. You know, find out what you can about this issue. It affects all of our families, and there's lots of information out there. And talk to your friends and your family and your neighbors, and start the public conversation because that's how we can move forward together.
Thank you. Absolutely. We'll go back to Kevin. And when we protect our water, we're protecting ourselves. What does that mean to you? What does that mean to all of us?
Wow. Well, that's the core essential. You know, the platitude is true. Water is life. And, you know, I too am astounded. You mentioned it there. It's an interesting coincidence that this planet we call Earth is covered 70% by water. You know, maybe if we're honest, we should call it ocean. And our bodies are 70% water. That's not a coincidence. And what we put into our water, and everything's going to make its way into the waterways. You know, it's going to flow downstream, it's going to go to the bay, it's going to get to the ocean, it's going to come back in the rain and start the hydrological cycle all over again. And, you know, the indigenous wisdom understood that, and we've somehow lost our way on that. And, you know, water is vital to everything. We can't survive without it for very long. Water grows the plants that nourish us, that we need to not just survive, but to thrive on. So it's really a core fundamental, and the fact that we treat it so casually, that we waste water in so many ways. I think here in California, we're somewhat aware when we've had the droughts, and we're in an arid west, and in my home state of Pennsylvania, there's lots of water, and they might not think about it so much. And, you know, after that 3-hour rain delay for the Pittsburgh-Oakland A's game, it just comes down in buckets. And, they use it to force inject it in to get natural gas out of fracked shale. It's the epicenter of this huge catastrophe that's going on in my home state, contaminating water supplies, wasting water, putting chemicals into the water that they won't even tell us about, which is again back to a core fundamental that this film is about. So it's vital to our planetary health and to our own health. And like I said, it's sort of a platitude that water is life, but it is. And I think the marketing things that pollution just got personal, this tagline I really love, and also feedback that we're here to learn, and we need to think, and then we need to act. There's not one thing I can tell you to do. Do one thing. Do one simple thing. Don't waste water. Get a filter. Be mindful of all those things. And do another simple thing. And then do something harder. And we can be consumers, or we can be conscious consumers. But we could be more than consumers. Yes, that's our society we live in. We have to be citizens again. And we need to come together and take action. And that takes effort, and it takes investment to fight the money that is in our political system. And to make a difference, we need to invest money in protecting our water supply, to not letting it be polluted, to understanding what these chemicals are that are going into our land, our food, and in ourself, and into our water. So, sorry for a long-winded answer, but water is vital and fundamental to it's everything.
Makes perfect sense to me, right? Thank you. Alan, you so beautifully started this whole thing. The last question will be going to you so you can end it on a great note, of course. You've been a strong advocate for organic living, and you wrote a book on the subject over 5 years ago suggesting that children start an organic diet when they're still in the womb. Extremely important now. My wife, who we're going to have our third child in just a few weeks, it's extremely important. Thank you. Now, should parents switch to an all-organic diet for the health of their children? Does that make sense?
So when I talked at the beginning about, the first question about the state of kids' health, it has been getting worse. 1 in 6 kids now has a neurodevelopmental or learning problem. In a backwards way, that's really good news. Because all of the most pressing health concerns in kids today, and adults too, the things that are rapidly increasing, it's not our genes that have changed, it's how we eat, how we move, the chemicals we're exposed to. Which means there are lifestyle and environmental solutions to our most pressing health problems. There's things we can do. And we don't have to be personally concerned about all 80,000 chemicals out there. The way they get into our body, it's in our mouth, it's what goes on our skin, and it's the air that we breathe, primarily the air in our own homes. And so if you're going to do something personal, the way to start is clean food, and the shorthand for that is organic. It's a system of agriculture that's not polluting our planet, that is actually enriching it. And there was a study that was done in Seattle recently with that nasty pesticide that you heard about, chlorpyrifos. They took typical suburban kids, did urine drug testing for pesticides, and found evidence of chlorpyrifos in typical suburban kids, not agricultural workers, that were at levels that indicated they were getting exposed to this neurotoxin above the EPA safety limit. And then they had them switch to a mostly organic diet. And within 24 hours, their urine tests cleaned up. They were virtually gone and stayed gone for day after day after day for 5 days. And then they switched them back to their regular suburban diet, and the levels shot back up again. So we're chronically exposing kids to this stuff. But with our very next shopping trip, we can make a difference. Clean food and water into the mouth, clean cosmetics and personal care products, use the EWG database, and support companies that sign the Compact for Safe Cosmetics. Skin Deep is the name of the database. You can look up any product that you've got and see. Just choose clean stuff for your skin. And in your home, get fresh air.
I love it. Thank you everyone for sticking around so late on a school night. And I want to thank every single person on our panel again. Mr. Kevin Connelly from the Earth Island Institute, Joe Guth from the Science and Environmental Health Network, Krista Schaefer from the Pesticide Action Network, Stacy Malkan from the Campaign for Safe Cosmetics, Judi, Shils from Teens Turning Green, and Dr. Alan Green. Go to dralangreen.com. Please, everyone, one thing that I want to get across, if that's okay with everybody, is that, you know what, this film isn't about me. It's about you, and it's about all of us. Together, for the first time in history, we have a common problem, every single one of us. And so it's up to us to make that difference, and starting right now. So you go home and you tell your friends, you tell your family, tell somebody about what's going on, because if we don't address this issue, dare I say it, I don't have any idea what this is going to look like in 50 years. And I don't want that to be my kids. And I don't want that to be your kids either. So if we're going to make a difference, it has to start today. And so I'm confident in the ability of each and every one of us to accomplish this task, because we can, and we absolutely have to. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming out for this film, for listening to our amazing panel, and thank you, everybody, for being here. And everybody, please get home safely and have a wonderful evening. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Everyone, tell your friends to see this film. Host house parties, show it, spread it around, send DVDs to your congresspeople, and let's thank Ed one more time.